Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. Trust shattered by blood relatives leaves wounds that never truly heal. My own flesh and blood stole my life's work. My son betrayed me for luxury and greed. I still remember the moment I realized my bakery wasn't mine anymore. The key wouldn't turn in the lock. 40 years of early mornings, flour-dusted aprons, and customer smiles. Gone in an instant. Not by fire or bankruptcy, but by my own son's signature on papers I never saw. My name is Loretta Jean. At 61, I thought I knew heartbreak. I'd buried a husband, weathered financial storms, and raised a child alone. But nothing prepared me for that Tuesday morning when I stood outside my own bakery, Loretta's sweet haven, like a stranger. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you can't come in," said a man I'd never seen before, blocking the doorway where I'd walked through for decades. "The ownership has changed. I have orders." My mouth went dry. There must be a mistake. "I own this bakery." He shook his head. "Not according to these papers. It was sold last week to Horizon Enterprises." Sold? My bakery? The building I'd sacrificed everything to buy, the recipes passed down through generations, the place where I'd raised my son Calvin between batches of sweet potato pie and pound cake, sold without my knowledge? My knees nearly buckled. That's not possible. I never signed anything. But someone had. And deep down, I already knew who. The betrayal tasted bitter in my mouth as I backed away, watching strangers move through my kitchen windows. They were already removing the hand-painted sign my late husband had made. Already erasing me. I called Calvin 12 times before he finally answered. "Mama, I can explain," he said, his voice casual, as if we were discussing a minor misunderstanding and not the theft of my entire legacy. It was a business opportunity we couldn't pass up. Desiree and I. "Desiree and you?" My voice trembled. "You sold my bakery for her?" His silence told me everything. What followed was a nightmare I never saw coming, and a revenge that nobody, especially not my son and his greedy wife, could have anticipated. If you're watching this now, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. Also download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. But first, let me take you back to where this all began, before the betrayal, before I lost everything, and before I discovered just how deep my son's deception truly went. I wasn't always a baker. Growing up in Birmingham as the daughter of a church organist and a janitor, I learned early that life doesn't hand you sweetness, you have to create it yourself. Mama would stretch a pot of beans for days, making magic with cornbread and a little fatback. "Loretta Jean," she'd say, watching me stir the pot, "food is love. When words fail, let your hands do the talking." Those hands taught me everything. Kneading dough until it felt like a baby's cheek, folding butter into biscuits until they whispered promises. When my husband Jerome walked out on me and 2-year-old Calvin, leaving nothing but empty cupboards and broken promises, I didn't crumble. I baked. In our tiny apartment kitchen, with Calvin sleeping on a makeshift bed nearby, I'd mix and measure until dawn broke. Those first pound cakes and sweet potato pies I sold to church members paid our rent when nothing else would. "Look what Mama made," I'd tell little Calvin, showing him how butter and sugar transformed into something precious. His small fingers would press into dough, leaving tiny fingerprints that baked into permanence. By the time Calvin was 10, those fingerprints had multiplied into something bigger. A down payment on a small storefront on Auburn Avenue. Nothing fancy, just enough room for 2 ovens, a display case, and a counter where folks could sit and share their troubles over coffee and warm pastry. "Loretta's Sweet Haven," the sign read, painted by Jerome's brother as a peace offering. A haven it was, not just for me and Calvin, but for the community that gathered there. Calvin grew up behind that counter. He learned fractions by measuring cups of flour, economics by counting change, and customer service by remembering everyone's favorite treat. Miss Gladys with her apple turnovers. Pastor Wilson with his cinnamon rolls. Old Mr. Franklin, who claimed my peach cobbler cured his arthritis. "You're building something special here, Mama," teenage Calvin would say, pride gleaming in his eyes as he swept floors after school. When he won that scholarship to Morehouse College, I cried tears of joy. My boy, first in our family to go to college. I thought he'd study business to help grow what we'd built together. The bakery paid those extra college expenses. Textbooks, nice clothes so he wouldn't feel out of place, spending money so he could take a girl for coffee. But college changed him in ways I didn't expect. He came home that first summer talking about corporations and franchises. "Mama, Sweet Haven could be in every mall in America," he said, eyes bright with visions I couldn't see. "We could be the next Mrs. Fields." "Why would I want that?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I know every person who walks through that door. Their children. Their troubles. Their joys." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Because that's how you build wealth, Mama. Not by serving one pie at a time." Something shifted between us then, subtle as overmixed batter that loses its lightness. I noticed him watching the register, calculating profits instead of greeting customers. Suggesting shortcuts that would save money but sacrifice quality. Bringing home business magazines with articles about scaling operations. The breaking point came during his senior year. Calvin brought 3 men in suits to the bakery after hours. They laid out glossy folders on the table where I usually rolled dough. "These investors want to franchise Sweet Haven," Calvin announced, not asking but telling. "All you need to do is sign here, and we'll open 5 locations next year." I flipped through their proposal: chemical preservatives to extend shelf life, frozen dough to ensure consistency, a central kitchen that would ship to all locations. "This isn't my bakery," I said quietly, closing the folder. "This isn't Sweet Haven." Calvin's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Then maybe you don't understand business, Mama." The men left, but the chill between us remained. I caught him staring at the bakery sometimes, not with love but with calculation, like he was appraising property rather than looking at his heritage. That's when I began to worry about what would happen when I was gone. Would he preserve what we'd built, or would he sell it to the highest bidder? I never imagined I wouldn't have to wait that long to find out. Calvin met Desiree at a fundraising gala for Morehouse alumni. He brought her to Sunday dinner the following week, and I knew immediately something had shifted in my son's universe. Desiree Washington walked into my humble house like she was doing us a favor. Hair perfectly styled, nails manicured with tiny jewels, clothes that whispered expensive promises. When Calvin introduced her as a marketing executive, she corrected him, "Brand elevation strategist, baby." The way she said it made Baker sound like a child's career dream. I served my Sunday best: smothered chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens and fresh rolls. Desiree took small bird-like bites and asked if the butter was clarified, and if the chicken was free-range. Terms that had never entered my kitchen in 60 years. "Calvin tells me your little bakery has been around for decades," she said, somehow making decades sound like centuries, ancient and outdated. "Have you ever thought about rebranding? Artisanal baking is very trendy right now." I smiled tightly. "We're not trendy, honey. We're necessary." She laughed like I'd told a joke. That dinner was just the beginning. Soon Calvin and Desiree were inseparable, and with every visit, she brought new ideas for elevating Sweet Haven. "You could charge triple for these pies with the right packaging and storytelling," she'd say, snapping photos of my kitchen for what she called content strategy. "People will pay premium prices for authenticity and heritage," she explained once, scrolling through her phone to show me bakeries with exposed brick walls and minimalist logos. Calvin and I could help position you as a luxury heritage brand. What bothered me wasn't the suggestions themselves. It was how Calvin nodded along entranced. How he started using words like leverage and monetize when talking about recipes my grandmother had whispered to me as a child. Their wedding came fast, too fast. A lavish affair at a plantation-style venue with chandeliers and champagne fountains. I wore my best dress and felt underdressed. Calvin paid for it all, though his bank account shouldn't have supported such extravagance. When I asked, he just winked and said, "Investment's paying off, Mama." 3 months after the wedding, they showed up at my house with a thick folder of papers. Calvin wore a suit I'd never seen before. Desiree wore expectation like perfume. "We have an incredible opportunity," Calvin announced, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "A restaurant group wants to partner with Sweet Haven. They'll provide capital for expansion, marketing, everything." Desiree jumped in. "They're offering a significant sum up front plus royalties. But they need a decision by Friday." Friday, just 3 days away. My pulse quickened. "Why the rush?" I asked, scanning pages filled with legal language I couldn't fully understand. "That's business, Mama," Calvin said dismissively. "Opportunities have timelines." Desiree leaned forward. "The bakery stays exactly the same. You'll still run it your way. But with our marketing expertise and their distribution channels, you could retire in luxury within 5 years." Something in her voice raised my hackles. Too smooth, too rehearsed. And Calvin wouldn't meet my eyes. "I need time to read everything," I said, gathering the papers. "And my lawyer should look at this." Their smiles faltered in unison. "Don't you trust me, Mama?" Calvin asked, his voice catching on hurt that felt manufactured. "Trust needs transparency," I replied. "I'll read these tonight." After they left, I called my old friend Patricia, who'd retired from her legal practice the year before. She came over, reading glasses perched on her nose, and spent hours going through every page. "Loretta," she finally said, "this isn't a partnership agreement. This is a complete transfer of ownership. If you sign this, you'd be giving Calvin full control of Sweet Haven, including the right to sell it without your consent." My hands trembled as I poured us both a finger of bourbon. "My own son," I whispered. "Why would he hide this from me?" "The question," Patricia said gravely, "is what are they planning to do once they have control?" When Calvin called the next day, eager for my signature, I told him I needed more time. He pushed harder. I stood firmer. Our call ended with his first ever hang-up on me, a click that echoed through my kitchen like a gunshot. What I didn't know then was that I'd just started a countdown clock, one that would end with me standing outside my locked bakery, staring at a stranger who told me I no longer belonged there. The morning I couldn't unlock my bakery door remains burned into my memory like an overcooked crust, bitter and impossible to scrape away. I'd arrived at 4:30 a.m. as always, thermos of coffee in one hand, purse in the other. The streetlights still glowed against the pre-dawn darkness as I approached the familiar storefront. From a distance, everything looked normal. It was only when I got closer that wrongness crept in. The lights were already on inside. And the sign, my sign, was gone. My key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it the special way I always had. Nothing. Pressing my face to the glass, I saw unfamiliar boxes stacked on my counter. A man I didn't recognize moved about my kitchen wearing a white coat that should have been mine. I knocked, first gently, then with increasing urgency. When the man finally came to the door, his expression wasn't apologetic. It was annoyed. "We're not open yet," he said through a crack in the door. "This is my bakery," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. There's been a mistake. That's when he told me about the ownership change. About papers I never signed. About Horizon Enterprises, a company I'd never heard of. You need to leave, he said finally. Or I'll have to call security. Security. To remove me from the building I'd mortgaged my future to buy. From the kitchen where I'd taught my son to measure flour. Miss Darlene, my longtime assistant, arrived to find me sitting on the curb, staring at my hands like they might hold answers. Loretta? What's happening? She asked, her weathered face creased with concern. Calvin sold the bakery, I said, the words tasting like ash. He sold it without telling me. After 12 unanswered calls, I drove to Calvin and Desiree's townhouse, a sleek two-story with a manicured lawn in a gated community. Their driveway sat empty, but I waited, determined to get answers. 3 hours later, their BMW pulled up. Calvin froze when he saw me on their porch. Desiree glanced between us, then hurriedly went inside, designer shopping bags clutched to her chest. How could you? I asked simply. Calvin straightened his shoulders. A gesture I recognized from when he was a boy preparing to lie. It was a business decision, Mama. You weren't seeing the big picture. The big picture? You stole from me. You forged my signature. My voice rose with each word. Your father built those shelves with his bare hands before he died. Your grandmother's recipes feed those customers. That wasn't yours to sell. Actually, it was. Calvin's voice shifted to something colder, almost professional. Remember last year when you were sick? Those papers you signed giving me power of attorney while you recovered? They never expired. The memory hit me like cold water, pneumonia that had hospitalized me for 2 weeks. Calvin handling the bills, the bakery, everything while I recovered. I'd signed whatever he put in front of me, grateful for his help. You used that to steal from me? The betrayal doubled, tripled in an instant. Your own mother? I didn't steal, he insisted, voice rising. I made a smart business move. That bakery was worth 10 times what you were making from it. We got $650,000, Mama. More money than you'd see in a lifetime of selling pies. We. I caught the word like a fishbone. Where's the money, Calvin? His eyes slid away from mine. Invested. For our future. The door opened behind him, and Desiree appeared, now changed into lounge where that probably cost more than my monthly bakery profit. Calvin, why is she here? She asked, not acknowledging me directly. We have the dinner with the Tuckers tonight. You need to get ready. Dinner? I echoed. You sell my life's work and go to dinner? It's business, Loretta, Desiree finally addressed me. Calvin made an executive decision for the family's financial future. The bakery was a charming operation, but ultimately a limited asset. We've liquidated it for maximum return. Liquidated. My voice broke on the word. That bakery fed you at my table. Paid for Calvin's first car. Put him through college. And we're grateful, she said with practiced sincerity. That's why we've set aside some money for you. A monthly stipend. Very generous, considering the bakery's actual profitability margins. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy who once proudly wore flower handprints on his school clothes now stood before me in an expensive suit, unable to meet my eyes. Where is my money? I asked again, more firmly. Calvin shifted uncomfortably. We've allocated funds across several investment vehicles. There's the Dubai property development. Dubai. The world tilted beneath me. You sold my bakery to buy property in Dubai? Not just property, Desiree interjected, excitement overriding her caution. We're joining an exclusive investment group. Plus, we leave next week for a networking retreat. 6 nights at the Burj Al Arab, the world's only 7-star hotel. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. My bakery, my legacy, had been sacrificed for a luxury vacation and investment scheme. "Get in the car, Calvin," I said quietly. "What?" He looked confused. "Get in my car right now. We're going to the police. You forged my signature. That's fraud." Panic flashed across his face. "Mama, you can't be serious. It's done. The money's spent. You'll get your stipend." "I don't want a stipend. I want justice." My voice echoed across their perfect lawn, drawing curtains aside in neighboring houses. "You think I won't press charges against my own son? Try me." Calvin looked at Desiree, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. His face hardened. "I'm not going anywhere," he said flatly. "And there's nothing you can do about it." "We have all the paperwork, Loretta," Desiree added. "Properly filed and executed. The bakery sale is legal and final. I'm sorry you're upset, but perhaps this is an opportunity for you to enjoy retirement." They stood together in their doorway, a united front against the mother who had given everything. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching, finally broke. "You think this is the end?" My voice came out surprisingly calm. "Let me tell you something about baking, son. When something rises too fast without proper foundation, it collapses. Always." I turned and walked to my car, their silence heavy behind me. As I drove away, tears blurred my vision, but a strange clarity formed in my mind. This wasn't just about a bakery. This was about justice. About consequences. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved with your whole heart, you know the pain I felt. The hollow ache that comes from realizing the person you raised doesn't recognize your worth. If you're feeling that connection to my story, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear what happened next. Tell me in the comments if you think I should have forgiven Calvin or if what I did next was justified. Because what my son and his wife didn't know was that Miss Darlene hadn't just been my assistant for 15 years. She had been a paralegal before that. And she had friends in places that would soon become very important to my story. The week after discovering my bakery had been sold from under me, I barely left my bedroom. The curtains stayed drawn. Dishes piled in the sink. The phone rang until voicemail picked up. Each morning, I'd wake up thinking it was all a bad dream, only to remember all over again. Grief comes in waves, they say. Mine came in recipes. I'd catch myself mentally measuring flour for a cake no one would eat, or reaching for vanilla extract that wasn't there. 40 years of muscle memory doesn't disappear overnight. Miss Darlene started coming by daily, bringing food I couldn't taste and news I couldn't bear to hear. "They've renamed it Urban Crumb," she told me one afternoon. "Charging $8 for a slice of sweet potato pie that doesn't taste half as good as yours." I pulled the covers higher. "I don't want to know." "The regulars are boycotting," she continued, opening my curtains despite my protests. "Pastor Wilson told his whole congregation not to set foot in there. Miss Gladys stood outside with a sign yesterday saying, 'This is not Loretta's.'" A small warmth flickered in my chest, but the darkness quickly swallowed it. "Doesn't change anything," I mumbled. "The bakery's gone. Calvin took everything." Miss Darlene sat on the edge of my bed, her weight making the mattress dip. "Not everything," she said firmly. "He didn't take your skills, your recipes, your reputation, and he sure didn't take your friends." She was right about the friends part. My phone had dozens of missed calls, customers, church members, other business owners from the street. The community was rallying, but I couldn't find the strength to face them. What would I even say? I asked Miss Darlene. That my own son betrayed me? That I was too trusting? Too stupid? You say nothing, she replied. You let us help you instead. Help arrived in unexpected forms. Pastor Wilson's wife dropped off casseroles. The barber next door to my old bakery collected signatures for a petition. Miss Gladys's grandson, a lawyer fresh out of school, offered free legal advice. Slowly, I began to emerge from the darkness. Started combing my hair again. Answering the phone. Sitting on the porch instead of hiding in bed. That's when Miss Darlene brought Jasper by. Jasper Henderson had owned the accounting firm 2 blocks from Sweet Haven for 20 years. He'd done my taxes, helped with business loans, and eaten my coconut cake every Friday without fail. Loretta, he said, setting his briefcase on my coffee table, I've been looking into the sale of your bakery. Something isn't right with those numbers. He spread papers across the table, financial records, property assessments, bank statements. Sweet Haven sold for $650,000, he explained, pointing at documents. But the market value of that property, with established business goodwill, should have been closer to $900,000. They undervalued it? I asked, struggling to focus on numbers when my heart still felt shattered. Intentionally, Jasper confirmed. And that's not all. The buyer, Horizon Enterprises, doesn't exist. At least, not as a legitimate company. My head snapped up. What do you mean? It's a shell company connected to Quick Fund Capital, he said, his voice dropping. They're predatory lenders, Loretta. Loan sharks with fancy business cards. Miss Darlene touched my arm. That's how Calvin got the money so fast. He didn't sell the bakery to investors. He used it as collateral for a high-interest loan. The room seemed to tilt. But that would mean... It means, Jasper finished, that if they don't pay back that loan on schedule, with interest rates that border on criminal, your bakery will truly be lost, and Calvin could face worse consequences than just losing the property. How bad are these people? I whispered. Jasper and Miss Darlene exchanged glances. Bad enough that Calvin should be very worried, he replied carefully. As this information sank in, another piece of paper caught my eye, a business registration form. What's Lux by Desiree? I asked, pointing to the document. Jasper cleared his throat. That appears to be a boutique registered solely in your daughter-in-law's name. Opened 3 weeks ago in Buckhead. Initial investment, $175,000. The betrayal crystallized into something even harder and colder. Not only had they stolen my bakery for quick cash, but Desiree had siphoned off money for her own business, leaving Calvin holding the bag with the loan sharks. Does Calvin know about this? I asked. Based on the paperwork, I doubt it, Jasper said. His name isn't on any of the boutique documents. Just hers. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, not joyful but knowing. She's playing him. Just like he played me. That evening, after Jasper left, Miss Darlene and I sat on my porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. What are you thinking, Loretta? She asked quietly. I rocked slowly, the chains of the swing creaking a familiar rhythm. I'm thinking about justice, I said finally. Not vengeance, justice. There's a difference. I nodded. Vengeance burns everything down and leaves you with ashes. Justice rebuilds something better from the wreckage. I stopped the swing. I want my bakery back, Darlene. Not just the building, the legacy, the community, the purpose. And Calvin? She asked carefully. My heart twisted. No matter what he'd done, he was still the baby I'd nursed, the child I'd raised alone. My son needs to learn that actions have consequences, I said, my voice strengthening. And his wife needs to learn that some bonds can't be broken by greed. Miss Darlene smiled, a slow, satisfied smile I'd never seen before. I was hoping you'd say that. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Because I've found something that changes everything. I looked at the folder, then back at her determined face. What exactly did you find, Darlene? The key to getting everything back, she said, opening the folder. And making sure they never forget what they tried to take from you. The porch light illuminated documents that would change the course of everything that followed. Papers that would either save my legacy or destroy what remained of my family. What would you do if you discovered a way to reclaim everything that was stolen from you? Would you use it, even if it meant potentially destroying your child's future? Tell me in the comments what choice you would make. The folder Miss Darlene brought contained 3 crucial items: a copy of my original power of attorney document, bank transfer records showing where every penny from the bakery sale had gone, and a loan agreement with Quick Fund Capital bearing Calvin's signature, with terms that would make a shark back away. The power of attorney Calvin used was for medical decisions only, Miss Darlene explained, tapping the paper. It specifically excluded financial matters. I kept a copy after notarizing it. I stared at the document, remembering signing it from my hospital bed. So the sale wasn't legal. Not remotely, she confirmed. But challenging it directly would take months in court, and by then they could strip everything valuable and disappear, I finished. Miss Darlene nodded grimly. Exactly. We need to be smarter. More strategic. That night, we formulated what we called Operation Just Desserts. A plan not just to reclaim what was mine, but to ensure Calvin and Desiree learned the kind of lesson that sticks to your bones. Step 1 began the very next morning. I called Calvin, my voice carefully modulated to sound defeated and resigned. I've been thinking, I told him. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for me to enjoy retirement. His relief was audible. That's great, Mama. You deserve to rest. I just need to get some of my personal items from the bakery, I said, my voice catching just enough to sound authentic. Family photos, my special rolling pin, your father's recipe box. Calvin hesitated only briefly before agreeing. I'll call the new manager. You can go tomorrow morning. Step 2 involved Miss Darlene's cousin Vernon, who worked at the county clerk's office. He helped us file paperwork questioning the validity of the sale without triggering immediate alerts. This created a legal cloud over the property. Not enough to stop anything, but enough to make potential buyers nervous. Step 3 required patience. While I quietly gathered allies and documentation, Calvin and Desiree prepared for their Dubai trip, blissfully unaware of the threads beginning to unravel around them. I returned to church that Sunday, head held high despite the whispers and sympathetic glances. After service, Pastor Wilson approached me. Loretta, the church council met last night, he said. We've decided to offer you the kitchen in the community center. It's yours to use until you get back on your feet. Tears welled in my eyes, the first tears not born of sorrow since this ordeal began. I don't know what to say. Say you'll bake again, he replied simply. This community needs your light. The following Tuesday, while Calvin and Desiree boarded their flight to Dubai, I tied on an apron in the church kitchen. My hands remembered what my heart had forgotten, the comfort of kneading dough, the precision of measuring spices, the joy of creation. By afternoon, the scent of sweet potato pies and pound cakes filled the halls. Church members spread the word faster than cinnamon rolls disappear at Christmas. By week's end, I had a line of customers picking up orders, leaving cash and hugs in equal measure. Meanwhile, Miss Darlene monitored Calvin and Desiree's social media, a parade of excess documented for the world to see. Camel rides in the desert. Shopping bags from designer stores. Champagne on hotel balconies. each post more extravagant than the last. "They're burning through cash like kindling," Miss Darlene reported. "And look, she keeps tagging her new boutique, using the trip to drum up publicity." I nodded, focused on the ledger before me. In just 1 week of baking from the church kitchen, I'd made enough to open a modest bank account labeled Sweet Haven, Resurrection Fund. "Any word from our friend at Quick Fund?" I asked. Miss Darlene's smile turned wolfish. "Mr. Patterson is very interested in our information, particularly about how the loan proceeds were misrepresented and diverted. This was the riskiest part of our plan. Through Jasper's connections, we'd arranged a meeting with Leonard Patterson, regional director at Quick Fund Capital. These weren't good people. They were predatory lenders who squeezed desperate borrowers dry. But in this case, their ruthlessness worked in my favor. Mr. Patterson had been shocked to learn that the business expansion loan Calvin had taken out using the bakery as collateral was actually funding luxury travel and a separate business registered solely to Desiree. Such deception violated multiple terms of their agreement. "He's accelerating the repayment schedule," Miss Darlene continued. "First payment due the day they return from Dubai." "And the boutique?" "Vernon's contact at the city licensing department is reviewing their permits. Seems they may have misclassified the business to avoid certain inspections." I didn't take pleasure in these maneuvers, not exactly. But I felt something long dormant awakening in me, power. Not power over others, but power within myself. Agency. Control over my own destiny. By the time Calvin and Desiree returned, sunburned and laden with shopping bags, the first threads of their deception had begun to visibly fray. I watched from Miss Darlene's car as they arrived home from the airport, stepping out of their hired town car with the casual confidence of people who believe they're untouchable. Calvin's phone rang before they even reached their front door. From his body language, the sudden stiffening, the frantic gesturing, I knew it was Quick Fund. The boutique was next. 2 days after their return, city inspectors arrived at Lux by Desiree, clipboard in hand. By afternoon, a bright orange notice of violation was taped to the door. But the true masterstroke came from an unexpected ally, Jasper's niece, who worked at the Atlanta Business Chronicle. The story ran the following Monday: local legacy bakery stolen through fraudulent documents. The article didn't name Calvin or Desiree directly. Libel laws protected them that far, but it detailed how Sweet Haven Bakery, a beloved community institution for over 3 decades, had been sold without the owner's consent through misused medical documentation. The community response was immediate and fierce. Protests formed outside the now renamed bakery. Longtime customers shared stories on social media. The hashtag Justice for Loretta trended locally. Inside their townhouse, I imagined Calvin and Desiree's panic growing by the hour. Quick Fund demanding immediate payment. The boutique shuttered for violations. The community turned against them. Their carefully constructed house of cards wobbling in the wind. I didn't call. Didn't text. Just waited, baking pie after perfect pie in the church kitchen, building my resurrection fund dollar by dollar. 7 days after they returned from Dubai, my doorbell rang at 11 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Calvin alone on my porch, his face haggard in ways that aged him 10 years. "Mama," he called, his voice breaking. "Please. I need your help." I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Where's Desiree?" I asked calmly. His laugh was hollow. "Gone. Cleared out the bank account and disappeared 3 days ago. Said she needed space to reassess our partnership." I wasn't surprised. The bank records Miss Darlene had obtained showed Desiree had opened a separate account weeks before the bakery sale. "Quick Fund is threatening to take everything," Calvin continued, desperation edging his voice. "The house, the cars. They're saying I committed fraud. They want the full loan amount plus penalties by next week. And did you? I asked quietly. Commit fraud? He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I just wanted to build something bigger. Something impressive. To make you proud. By stealing from me? The question hung between us like smoke. I made a mistake, he whispered. A terrible mistake. I let Desiree convince me it was just business, not personal. I studied my son's face, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd betrayed me, and felt the full weight of the choice before me. In that moment, I held his future in my hands, just as surely as I'd once held him as an infant. What I did next would determine everything, not just for my bakery, but for the very soul of my family. The question wasn't whether Calvin deserved forgiveness. The question was what kind of justice would truly heal these wounds. Would I help the son who stole my legacy? Or would I let him face the consequences of his actions alone? The clock was ticking, and QuickFund wasn't known for their patience or mercy. If you were in my shoes, would you help Calvin after his betrayal? Comment below with what you would do, forgive or walk away, and why. This might be the hardest decision a mother ever has to make. Calvin stood on my porch, shoulders slumped, eyes pleading. The designer clothes he'd worn in Dubai photos had been replaced by a wrinkled shirt and jeans. His watch, the Rolex he'd flashed in so many social media posts, was noticeably absent. Please, Mama, he repeated. I need your help. I gestured for him to sit on the porch swing. Not inviting him inside felt significant, a boundary I needed. He sank down, hands clasped between his knees like when he was a child confessing to broken rules. QuickFund is threatening legal action, he continued. Criminal charges, Mama. They're saying I misrepresented the loan purpose and diverted funds. They want $720,000 by next Friday, the original amount plus penalties. And you don't have it, I said. Not a question. He shook his head, eyes downcast. Desiree. His voice cracked. She took everything. Our savings. Even emptied out the business account for her boutique. Left me a note saying she needed to prioritize her personal brand journey. Any other time, those words might have sparked pity. Not tonight. Did you know, I asked quietly, that the power of attorney you used to sell my bakery was for medical decisions only? That what you did wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. His head snapped up, eyes wide with genuine shock. What? No. The lawyer said. What lawyer, Calvin? The one Desiree recommended. I let that sink in. You committed fraud. Not just against me, but against QuickFund too. Tears welled in his eyes. I didn't know, Mama. I swear I didn't know. But you knew you were selling my bakery without my permission, I countered, my voice steady. You knew you were taking my life's work. My legacy. I thought I was making a smart business move, he whispered. Upgrading our family's financial position. Our family. The words tasted bitter. The family you abandoned for Desiree? The mother you betrayed? That family. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I have the money to help you, I said after a long moment. Hope flickered across his face. You do. Not all of it. But enough for a good lawyer. Enough to negotiate with QuickFund. Maybe enough to save you from criminal charges. Relief washed over him. Thank you, Mama. I promise I'll pay back every. I held up my hand, stopping him. I didn't say I would help you. I said I could. The hope in his eyes wavered. Do you know what I've been doing since you sold my bakery? I asked. Baking. From the church kitchen. The community. The people you thought didn't matter, they've supported me. Ordered pies. Spread the word. I've saved almost $40,000 in just a few weeks. That's amazing, he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. That money is for Sweet Haven's rebirth, not for bailing out the son who tried to destroy it. His face crumpled. Then why tell me? Because I want you to understand what you threw away. Not just a bakery, a community, people who care, values that matter. So you're not going to help me? Desperation edged his voice. I studied my son, really looked at him. Behind the fear, behind the desperation, I searched for remorse. For understanding. For the boy I raised to know right from wrong. Calvin, when you were 6 years old, you stole a candy bar from Miller's grocery, I said softly. Remember what I did? He nodded slowly. You made me take it back. Apologize to Mr. Miller. Then work off the cost by sweeping his store every day for a week. Why did I do that? To teach me that actions have consequences, he mumbled. And did you ever steal again? No, ma'am. I leaned forward. What makes you think this lesson should be any different? Realization dawned on his face, followed by panic. Mama, this isn't like stealing candy. These people, quick fund, they're dangerous. They could ruin my life. No, Calvin. You ruined your life when you decided to steal from your mother. He stood abruptly. So that's it? You'll let them destroy me? Your only child. I rose too, looking him directly in the eye. I'm not letting anyone destroy you. I'm letting you face the consequences of your choices. This is crazy, he sputtered. Family is supposed to help family. Family is supposed to respect family, I corrected. You didn't respect me. You didn't respect what I built. And you certainly didn't respect what I tried to teach you. His face hardened, desperation turning to anger. Fine. I'll figure it out myself. I know you will, I said calmly. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to contact QuickFund tomorrow. You're going to confess everything. You're going to offer to help them recover whatever money Desiree took. And you're going to sign a statement admitting you fraudulently sold my bakery. And why would I do all that? He challenged. Because if you do, I'll use my savings to hire the best lawyer in Atlanta to negotiate on your behalf. If you don't, I'll testify against you myself. The ultimatum hung between us. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy I'd raised, confused, scared, looking to me for safety. Then his shoulders slumped in surrender. Okay, Mama, he whispered. I'll do it. The next morning, Calvin signed a notarized statement confessing to the fraudulent sale of Sweet Haven. Miss Darlene filed it with the court immediately. By afternoon, the sale had been officially contested. That Sunday, Pastor Wilson made an announcement that brought me to tears. Church family, he said, his voice carrying through the sanctuary, one of our own was wronged. Her legacy was stolen. Today, we're making it right. He unveiled a plan the congregation had created, a community investment fund to help me reclaim Sweet Haven. Not as charity, as partnership. The church members would own shares, but I would maintain controlling interest and full operational control. We believe in Loretta Jean, the pastor declared. We believe in her baking. And we believe in standing together when one of us falls. By Monday, we had raised enough to make a compelling offer to QuickFund, who, facing the prospect of a tainted property and legal challenges, accepted. The bakery would return to community hands, with me at the helm. As for Calvin, my conditions were non-negotiable. He would work off his debt, to me, to the community, by starting at the bottom. Sweeping floors. Washing dishes. Learning humility the hard way. This isn't punishment, I told him when he signed the agreement. This is redemption. He nodded, a fragile understanding forming between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. A path forward through accountability, not escape. That night, alone in my kitchen, I pulled out my grandmother's recipe box. The cards were yellowed, stained with decades of butter and vanilla. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, feeling the threads of legacy stretching backward and forward through time. Some legacies are made of brick and mortar. Some are made of sugar and flour. But the most important ones, I realized, are built on firmer foundations. Truth, justice, and the courage to demand both, even from those you love most. 1 year later, I stood behind the counter of Sweet Haven, restored, renewed, and buzzing with customers. The sign above the door now read Sweet Haven Community Bakery, reflecting its new ownership structure. Same recipes, same warmth, but with deeper roots in the neighborhood that saved it. The bell above the door jingled as Calvin entered, right on time for his shift. No designer clothes anymore, just a simple button-down and the black apron all my employees wore. He nodded respectfully to Miss Darlene, now our business manager, before tying on his apron. "Morning, Mama," he said quietly. "Morning, son," I replied, handing him the day's prep list. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Trust rebuilds slowly, like a pastry that can't be rushed. But watching him measure flour with careful precision, I saw something new emerging: humility. Purpose. Integrity learned through consequence rather than lecture. Desiree had vanished completely, last heard of trying to launch a lifestyle brand in Miami. The boutique she'd opened with my bakery money had been sold at auction to cover debts. Calvin had received divorce papers via certified mail, no return address provided. The hardest lessons often come from the people closest to us. Calvin had learned that shortcuts to success usually lead to dead ends. I had learned that sometimes love means allowing hard consequences rather than providing easy rescues. As for me, I discovered strength I never knew I had. At 62, I became not just a baker but a business owner in a new way, more strategic, more protected, but no less connected to the community that sustained me. Pastor Wilson came in every Friday for his usual order, now doubled because the church's community programs had expanded too. "You know what they're saying about you around town?" he asked one day, leaning on the counter while I boxed his cinnamon rolls. "What's that?" I asked. "That Loretta Jean doesn't just make the sweetest pies in Atlanta, she serves justice just as expertly." I laughed at that. Justice is just another recipe. Measure carefully. Don't rush the process. And make sure the foundation is solid before turning up the heat. My bakery case now displayed something new alongside the pies and cakes, a framed document showing Sweet Haven's community ownership structure. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "Legacy is not inherited. It is earned." Calvin had earned back his place, not as heir, but as student. Starting from scratch, just as I had once done with a baby on my hip and dreams in my heart. Some days, when the morning light streams through the windows just right, I catch him looking at the customers with new eyes. Not as wallets to be emptied, but as people with stories, with needs, with loyalty that can't be bought or sold. That's the true inheritance I wanted to pass down all along. Not just a building or a business, but values that withstand betrayal. Principles that rise even when hopes fall flat. So what did my son and his wife learn when they sold my bakery? That some things can't be purchased with money. That community is stronger than greed. That mothers may forgive, but justice still requires payment in full. And me? I learned that sometimes when you lose everything, you discover what truly matters. That when the flour settles, character remains. If you've enjoyed this story of betrayal and justice, please like and subscribe to hear more true family dramas. Tell me in the comments, would you have given your child a second chance like I did with Calvin? Or would you have walked away completely? Thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's rebuilding something better from the crumbs others leave behind. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.